Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. We've had yet another action-packed single-seater race week with Mechachrome drama in F2, a heated battle for the win in F1 and, most importantly of all, an action-packed penultimate round in the Formula E Championship, setting us up for a beautiful final round to come. But as is tradition on the channel, we begin with the slowest of the categories. We begin over in Brazilian F4 with the third round so far, and we've had wins evenly spread between championship leader Matheus Comparato, the returning star from the first round Alvaro Cho, and female sensation Rafaela Ferreira, with a reverse grid win, so therefore yet another female F4 win this year. And I do want to focus on Ferreira a little bit just because I was quite confused by her performance and by my lack of Portuguese language skills, so please someone able to speak Portuguese inform me, did she get a penalty in the first race? Because she had a beautiful charging drive through the mid-pack, once again proving that she's not just capable of doing well in the reverse grid races, but she can actually move her way forward in a race as well. But yeah, then she had to take what looked like a drive through to me, but I couldn't quite figure out if maybe it was a puncture or front wing change instead. Either way, brilliant drive, but unfortunately she still left some crucial points on the table with her struggles in both the first and the third race with penalties. My favorite guy in the series is Ethan Nobels, at least this season, and he is now second in the standings with just consistency at the head of the midfield. Yes, he's not quite able to actually fight for race wins on merit just yet, but so far he is comfortably the best rookie and honestly just continues to impress in any scenario really. Last but not least, we had a returning driver in Arthur Pavey, who has had his first round of the year now in the third round of the season, so go figure, something probably went wrong funding wise, and I am very happy to report that at least he had a really strong comeback, taking two very convincing second places in the non-reverse grid rounds. Unfortunately, if he's got budget issues, we know how these tend to work out. In the slightly quicker machinery, over in the Formula Regional Japanese Championship, we now have the Westerners fully taking over the championship, with Michael Sauter taking 2 wins and the second place, and actually it was he and Jesse Lacey sort of fighting for the wins in most of the races, and interestingly they swapped wins, where each won on track once, but then gave the win to the other guy with a 10-second jump start penalty. So Lacey actually got a win in the race that Sauter won on track, and vice versa. I thought that was a bit funny, but either way, yeah, this time not just Sauter, but both put in really convincing performances. And also Sebastian Manson was right there with them in this sort of, it's hard to call it a lead pack because these races are still very split all around, but nonetheless in the sort of more convincing group of the grid, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, the local talent has had a bit of a rough ride with both Yoshiaka Nakamura and Fuma Horio. They both have pace to fight with the 3 aforementioned Western drivers, no doubt about it, but both had issues with, I believe for Horio it was a reported clutch issue, and I'm not entirely sure what it was for Nakamura, but either way, both of them missed one race each with a DNF, or a DNS rather, so very unfortunate, and sort of continues the odd trend of mechanical issues in Japanese junior formulas this year. Just a bit of a bizarre one, and I hope they get it sorted out because the series isn't the greatest to begin with, but issues like this sort of ruin it completely in my opinion. Anyway, let's go to the big one, to the F1 weekend. F1 was at the Red Bull Ring with all its support categories, and therefore we begin with Formula 3, and I am so happy to report that the championship remains as tight as ever, with Luke Browning leading with 106 points thanks to a controlled feature win ahead of both Mini and Beganovic. So we had a perfect feature race in that sense, with the 3 predetermined championship favourites going up against each other in a race-long battle for the podium positions. Truth be told, yes, Browning wasn't ever under too much attack directly, but he also wasn't ever able to really pull away, so he definitely couldn't fall asleep, let's put it this way. And then Mini and Beganovic actually were trading positions back and forth. Mini pulled off a few beautiful moves around the outside of turn 4 to claim P2 in the end, so really a beautiful piece of racing all around. Unfortunately for the championship, Beganovic lost some crucial points in the sprint by spinning out in turn 1. As far as I could tell, that was by himself, but please correct me if I'm being a bit blind. So not great for the championship, but I guess ensuring that things do stay close for the time being. Fornaroli unfortunately just lost a big chunk of points in his particular championship run just because he did have a very, very poor qualifying and therefore struggled to score any points throughout the weekend. One of the other guys we have to highlight is Christian Menzel. And Christian Menzel so far has been one of the revelations of the season, really. And it couldn't be any more true than this weekend. He truly was one of the highlights all around. Unfortunately, yet again, he was not able to finally find this race win. In the sprint, he had to settle for P3 behind teammate Nicolas Zolov and Martinius Stenson, both of those with a great drive. And then he did have a great tire conserving charge in the feature race to take P4 at the end of the race. So great drives all around, and with 78 points, he is still a dark horse in the championship fight. But nonetheless, I think we would all be really happy if he could seal the deal and find that first W, just, you know, for his sake, just so we know he can do that as well. As always, if there are winners, there are losers, so we have to spend some time talking about those less fortunate. And one of the heartbreaking stories really is Sebastian Montoya. I came into this season expecting really, truth be told, not a lot from Sebastian Montoya. I thought he's been really underwhelming so far for just large stretches of his career. But this season so far, he has been improving rapidly and he has had some really good drives. And this weekend wasn't any different. He's had pace, he's been running in the top 10 basically throughout the entire thing. But unfortunately, he managed to not score any points with 2 DNFs, taking himself out in the sprint race, and then he got taken out in the feature. So really disappointing. There is still the bright spot that yes, this time he is actually showing pace, unlike last season. Another unfortunate story is what happened over in the Van Amersfoort camp with Noël Lyon having a truly stunning opening chunk of that feature race, charging all the way to P4. I mean, I'd be really surprised if his tyres would have survived the entire race with that early charge, but either way, he never got to show it because he had to retire with a puncture. And the person on the Van Amersfoort team I am way more disappointed with is Sophia Flörsch. Now, for her, I had pretty high expectations actually. I thought she was underrated last year. She did get some really good drives in the PHM. And I thought, yeah, in Van Amersfoort, you know, maybe actually she scores some decent points this season. Yeah, obviously she's not going to be fighting for a championship, but, you know, hopefully a consistent top 10 contender was sort of what I was hoping for. And I mean, she's not even a consistent top 20 contender. So yeah, very disappointing. This was probably her best weekend of the year so far, but if her best weekend means she's missing out on points still, then unfortunately it just isn't really cutting it. Much like in its Formula 3 counterpart, the Formula 2 championship is also still incredibly close, as is tradition in these junior Formula championships really. Paul Aron is still leading with 115 points out of Isaac Hadjar with 106. And interestingly, yes, Paul Aron's still leading without a win, so he is on for an almost Porsche-esque season, albeit a tad closer than last year, I might suggest. But yeah, this could be Hadjar's championship to lead by now if he hadn't had a very poor sprint race result. Mechachrome playing its role there as well, which has really been one of the stories of the weekend. Unfortunately, Hauger stalling ahead of the formation lap after putting it on pole. Antonelli stalling in the pit during the feature race, costing him all points. Bearman's engine dying in the feature race. So really, this has been a classic Mechachrome weekend for all the drivers, and really the thing we absolutely don't want to see, not just in any junior Formula Championship, but one of this particular level. The other story in the championship is Bortoleto has actually surpassed Zane Maloney for P3. The latter had a very horrible no-score weekend to forget. Well, Bortoleto actually got his maiden win already. What a rookie season he is having, much like Paul Aron. Not quite as crispy, clean, consistent, but maybe with a higher upside even. And honestly, yeah, I'm just really happy that I massively underestimated this kid coming into this season. I am somewhat happy to report that Ollie Bearman actually also finally got to take his first win of the season in a pretty calm and almost for F2 standards, almost boring sprint race. But yeah, as I said, unfortunately, this got entirely undone in the feature where he just had to straight up retire, much like teammate Kimi, who didn't have to retire but lost 40 seconds and honestly might as well could have just retired afterwards. Really, this Prema is insanely frustrating to watch, and I know we are talking about it every single week, but every single week we are out there having to read people on the social medias, oh, what's going on? Why is this Antonelli guy being talked about as an F1 contender? Oh, why is Bearman getting a seat? I don't see anything special in him. And it's, if you've ever had this thought, because maybe you've not watched Kimi in Formula Regional, for example, listen, this is totally understandable, but always keep in mind, these kids have had careers for like a decade each, not just for the last couple months that you may have been watching. So yes, current form is obviously always a thing, and we can discuss how much of their current issues are Prema related and how much is maybe, I don't know, Bearman mentally being checked out already because he knows he's got his F1 drive lined up and Kimi not being quite ready for the thing. Listen, that can be a thing and we can have this discussion, but we have to stay reasonable, and it's incredibly unlikely that Bearman just straight up forgot how to drive F2 cars, any cars for that matter. There's one more key story we have to touch upon in F2 though, and that is Isaac Hadjar and his teammate Pepe Marti in the feature race having some drama. And I mean, Hadjar does attract drama just because he is a very emotional guy, but this time around it wasn't even all on him. It was a bit on him, a bit on Campos, and a bit on Marti, truth be told, being a very good team player and maybe almost too good for the particular championship he's competing in. Essentially, he had Hadjar behind, who's obviously still a key championship contender, and Hadjar did want to go past because he's at fresher tyres and he definitely looked quicker, no doubt about it. So Pepe Marti was actually nice enough to move out of the way, let Hadjar go. The one thing I do kind of not like about Hadjar here is him not even being particularly thankful on the radio, but I mean, whatever, it's in the heat of the moment, obviously we shouldn't really read into that. And well, essentially it turned out Hadjar can't actually just run away afterwards, so Marti was just sitting behind him, now getting his own tyres cooked in the dirty air, and essentially at the end of the race he obviously, understandably, asked to repass Hadjar to take the podium, and Hadjar wasn't having any of that. So slightly disappointing in terms of sportsmanship, but hey, these are junior drivers fighting for their careers, so it is understandable. And at the end of the day, Marti got a post-race penalty anyway, so it didn't really matter. Anyway, I'd still be interested to know what you made of that particular drama, so let me know down in the comments. For once, Formula 1 actually had some major drama as well, and not just off track, but actually on track this time around, with Max Verstappen and Lando Norris coming together in the Grand Prix, which these are the scenes that, yes, obviously we don't really want to see. I like my racing being decided without wrecks, but I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't entertaining and with all the aftermath and the discussions. And it is a little sad that in this case, both drivers seem to, you know, not really be able to look at this objectively, because truth be told, I think the incident is a little more on Max, hence why he got a penalty. I think it was a pretty reasonable penalty. Equally, I don't think it's egregiously taking Norris out by any stretch of the imagination. It is hard racing and Norris could have used a lot more of the left-hand side of the track as well to stay alive. It is what it is. I think the stewards handled it reasonably well. Yes, the 10-second penalty didn't affect Max's end result, but I mean, we know this from Hamilton taking out Max at Silverstone, for example, where also the penalty did not change the result. That's not how penalties work in this sport. I think we all just have to deal with that fact, and I personally think it's, you know, correctly handled like this. Either way, this might mean the championship fight could heat up even more going forward, and obviously I don't think anyone would mind. Personally, I just hope it doesn't turn too sour just with one little incident, which was honestly just a bit silly. Either way, the drama meant George Russell could actually get a win once again, I believe his second ever if I'm not mistaken, and he keeps not dominating Hamilton. That would be a little unfair, but yeah, it just shows that whenever Mercedes has an opportunity to do anything, it is most of the time Russell in position to pick up the pieces and not actually Hamilton. This is The fight between Russell and Hamilton was a lot higher anticipated when we thought they would be battling in a championship contending car, which obviously hasn't really happened so far, so the battle has been a little bit quiet and under the radar. But yeah, I do want to point out that it is very intense to watch, and it's quite cool to see that, yeah, it is actually Russell on merit beating Hamilton more often than not. Another guy we can give a quick shout out to is Oscar Piastri with a pair of P2s, both sprint and feature, or Grand Prix, shouldn't call it the feature, whatever. So continuing to establish himself as a top driver in only his second year. We have almost stopped talking about it because we've just accepted it as a fact, a bit like Pedro Costa over in MotoGP, if you're following that, where it's not even a highlight anymore when the guy does well, even though in his case we're only like 8 races in. But yeah, it feels like every now and then we should mention it up. Piastri is in fact still very, very new to the sport actually. Last but not least, in F1, we have the Sergio Perez drama, not really. Question, I suppose, is the fairest way of putting it. And we've talked about this before, but once again, this race, it is a little unacceptable. He spent most of the race being stuck behind Nico Hülkenberg, battling for P6, didn't actually manage to get the pass. I mean, congrats to Haas for scoring double points once again, that's great. But yeah, you can't really be allowed to finish behind Verstappen if Verstappen gets a puncture near the end of the race and a 10-second penalty on top, and he still finished like 20 seconds ahead or something. I don't really remember the seconds, but convincingly ahead. So again, the problem is very apparent. My issue is I don't really know what the solution is. They've clearly decided not to sign Carlos Sainz, who is like the only obvious upgrade, and even then I think he would only be a minor upgrade. And then yeah, all the top drivers are gone, so what do you do if you're Red Bull? I think giving Checo another contract makes sense, especially a 1-year deal. I absolutely agree with the 2-year deal. I mean, I just hope they have a way out if they really want one, because it might be necessary for 2026 if they want to fight for anything. Anyway, let's move on to some electric racing. Formula E had its penultimate round with a doubleheader at Portland, and man, it's been the perfect build-up for a final round, even though it did include a fair bit of, unexpected results and some drama to go along the way, as is par for the course with Formula E. Man of the weekend, no doubt about it, Antonio Felix da Costa with a pair of wins, making it an unbelievable 4 out of the last 5, and yet he is somehow basically out of the championship fight, which largely comes down to his disqualification at Misano earlier in the year. But I still just want to point out, we've talked about it going into the season, oh yeah, da Costa, he really has to step up now, with Porsche pulling him from the WEC effort so he can fully focus on Formula E. And it turns out Porsche has probably made the correct decision, because even if da Costa apparently doesn't like it and wants out and wants to go back to hypercar, he's doing really, really well ever since he started fully focusing on Formula E. So let's just put this out there. Well, if da Costa won both the races, this already means none of our primary championship contenders did get any wins. But the more unexpected thing here is that Nick Cassidy, the primary championship contender, who could have realistically actually sealed the deal here, I believe, mathematically, don't quote me on this, and actually instead of doing that, he managed to not score any points, and therefore leaving a huge gap to make this championship fight intense until the very last moment. Crucially, it's not just that he got wrecked and making this sort of undeserved and frustrating, he actually spun himself out, leading going into, I believe, the last or the penultimate lap of the first race, very late in the first race. Spinning yourself out from the lead is the sort of mistake that'll haunt you in your nightmares if you don't end up winning this particular championship. In the second race, I think he got taken out. It was a bit of a action-packed midfield shenanigan race, and yeah, we did have a lot of guys pitting at the same time with damage. As some guy pointed out on Reddit, I think it almost looked like they had introduced pit stops without telling anyone. I thought that was a funny comment, but either way, so yes, in the second race, not really his fault. Still, shocking no-score weekend. This means teammate Evans and Pascal Wehrlein both now have their chance. They're both tied for second with 155 points each. Evans unfortunately also left crucial points on the table though, because he actually ended up, picking up the pieces after Cassidy in the first race. He won that one on track, but got a penalty afterwards, hence why the Costa actually won. And then in Wehrlein's case, he first of all just didn't really have the best front-running pace all weekend long. Unlike the Costa, he never looked particularly threatening for a win. But then more importantly, he had a pretty controversial moment in the second race where his front wing got sort of knocked loose but was still attached to the car momentarily. And he decided not to pit. I don't know if that was his decision or more likely his engineer's decision. But yeah, him staying out with this loose front wing took out Sam Bird because eventually the wing came off and found Bird's car, and that's the end of that particular story. Somehow Wehrlein did not get penalized. I have the sneaking suspicion someone in the race direction might want to keep the championship fight intense. Obviously, this is a little unfair to suspect, but I'm just saying it is a, just a nice coincidence, isn't it? He is one of the primary championship contenders getting away with something like this. Anyway, it keeps the thing intense. Last but not least, there's another primary championship contender who has not scored any points this weekend, but unlike in Cassidy's case, it's not got anything to do with mistakes, and that's just Ollie Rowland with a very, very ill-timed illness, to phrase it this way, taking himself essentially out of the championship fight. He is now, I think, behind the Costa, so also still in it mathematically, but not really realistically. Really, really sad to see. He was almost my favorite guy to watch all season long. Definitely outperformed expectations by a huge amount and was really fun to watch and just consistently there at the front. So sad not to have him here this time around. Fortunately though, this gave the opportunity for yet another junior driver to get their debut, which, as you can imagine, I absolutely love. And in this case it was Kaya Collette, who missed a crucial oval test in Indy Next for this, but not too bad. He did a really decent job, I want to say. We know it's always difficult to sort of judge how these rookies did in Formula E, but he outqualified Van der Stress at least in the first race, so that was really, really good. That's about the best you can expect, really. Yes, his race pace in the peloton races just wasn't there to impact anything, but honestly, this is expected and absolutely nothing worth criticizing. Anyway, it's been a lot. That was all for the week, at least all we're going to cover. So let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments. Yes, we didn't talk about Chinese F4 because honestly, that stream is just super dodgy. We might get into it towards the midway point of the season to have a little look at the standings, but don't expect me to cover it week by week. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.